Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wench Bench, where friends sit and talk about fabulous fictional females and how their stories have influenced us throughout our lives. My name is Fonda.
And my name is Alison.
Today, Alison's going to be doing something different. She's going to be doing a trope, so not specifically talking about a individual fictional female fabulous don't know where I'm going. I was trying to think of another F character. Instead, she's going to tackle a whole trope called the final girl.
Yes, it's a pretty well-known horror trope among people who do enjoy that genre. I know Fonda doesn't particularly dabble.
I don't dabble.
I love horror. In the past 5-6 years or so, I've really gotten more into the art and the creation of genre and the different kind of stories that you can tell with it. And horror and women have a very interesting connection. As in, they are not treated well most of the time. A lot of times they're getting murdered, and a lot of not good stuff happens to them. But the final girl trope is almost a subversion of that, while at the same time still not treating them well. But at least they get to live, so that's a good thing.
Hey, there's that, you know. At least they get this.
At least they get to live.
At least they get to live.
So first, I would like to answer the question of what is a final girl?
Please do. I am very curious about that.
It is a trope in horror films, usually of the slasher variety, where...
Okay.
Yeah. Where there is one woman or girl left from a group, usually of youths, to confront the killer and survive the terror. Yeah, but it's a pretty self-explanatory trope title.
Cool.
She is often depicted as the innocent or virginal character compared to their other female counterparts and even their other male counterparts.
Okay.
Because oftentimes in slashers, it's about young people doing morally corrupt things, like having sex and drinking and doing drugs.
Oh, no.
Just generally being degenerates.
So I'm just curious, before you get into the final girl trope, are you going to be talking about like parodies of, because there's so many
I am going to mention
movies of slasher horror films, and I'm wondering if they do the final girl trope more comedically or like...
I will be getting into a couple of the different ways that this particular archetype has been handled.
Cool.
I'm going to mention some of my favorites later on and kind of talk about them because they're just so fun. I love a final girl.
Sounds weird to say.
Yeah.
Just like, I love a final girl. To me, I'm like, what? If anyone didn't know we were talking about a trope.
Yeah.
I'd be like, what do they think we're talking about?
No idea.
Who knows?
The term itself has a bit of a blurry definition depending on who you talk to. But in my opinion, a final girl is someone who not only survives to the end, but actually has agency in that survival.
Okay.
There are plenty of examples of women who are simply saved at the end, making them just really a female survivor.
Yeah.
And what I believe really makes a final girl is their will to live and willingness to fight to make sure that they do. Mm-hmm. I do also believe that there is a difference between a final girl and a heroine character or a main character. Okay. Because it's talked about Ellen Ripley from Alien being a final girl, but I don't consider her to be one because she does have so much agency because she's not really held to the same restraints as the final girls usually are.
Okay.
And the movie Alien kind of lacks the overtly sexual nature that comes with the storyline in which the final girl usually exists. Because it's really more sci-fi horror than it is like slasher, like teen horror.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Some examples of final girls that I will be briefly touching on later are Laurie Strode from Halloween, Sydney Prescott from Scream, and Sally Hardesty from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Don't know any of these women, never watched any of these shows, good. So I look forward to being told of their stories through a way that doesn't show me the horror directly on a screen.
Yeah. These are among the top final girls. When you look up any articles about this trope.
I'm gonna do it right now.
Yeah.
Final girl trope. Who fucking pops up? Oh, Halloween, the movie popped up.
Yep. Yeah, that's a biggin.
That's a biggin.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new one, but I am really excited to see it, where apparently...
Oh, there's a new one?
Yeah, where the older Jamie Lee Curtis actually comes back to play Laurie Strode, and she is dealing with, like, the trauma and stuff that was caused from the original one.
Oh, joy.
Yeah.
Anyways, back into it.
Yes. Usually throughout the movie, the viewer should begin to root for this character, because we kind of... In a lot of slasher films, we start out enjoying watching the killer kind of stalk his prey and kill these young adults, because they're all kind of just being shitty, and you just kind of enjoy their vapid, airheaded nature being punished in a weird way. But then your viewpoint shifts to the final girl, because you are seeing her go through all of these emotions, going through the fear and the terror, but still having the courage to survive and to fight. And you eventually you want to see her win. You are no longer rooting for the killer. You are now rooting for her survival and for her to fight back. And that's really fun. It's a really fun, switch in a lot of the movies that you can kind of notice as you're watching them, if you're looking for it.
Ooh. But only if you're looking for it. If you're not looking, you can't see it.
Oftentimes, these movies will end a bit ambiguously, perhaps teasing that the killer survived and that our final girl's ordeal is not yet over.
I hate that. I know I don't really watch slasher films, but I feel like I know of this scene a lot just because of, the odd time I might watch something that's slightly spooky or scary.
Yeah.
Or, a thriller, for example.
Yes.
It bothers me so much when you see a hand emerge and it's the bad guy's hand, or something where you hear foot, you know what I mean? There's whatever it is. You don't see the full body of the figure, but they show you something, and I'm just fuck you! I went through all of this pain watching and rooting for whoever was gonna kill the bad creepy thing to kill the bad creepy thing, and you're nah, bitch, that's not how it works. Yeah. They come back, and I'm I hate you so much.
I hate it. Thanks, I hate it.
Thanks, I hate it.
Another fun thing that you see quite a bit is that she is often kind of more modestly dressed. A lot of times she's a brunette, because she is compared to usually her friend, who has to be murdered at some point in the movie, who is blonde and dresses like a hussy and needs to be punished for being a slut. Which is just the classic thing, because as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the final girl is supposed to start off as this modest kind of what every young woman should be, and then she turns into not being that, because she has to fight a psycho killer.
Fuck.
The term was originally coined by Carol J. Clover in her book Men, Women, and Chainsaws, Gender in Modern Horror Film from 1992.
Oh!
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Some basics from Clover's book are that the final character must be female, since the largely male audience would have a harder time accepting that a male character experienced abject terror. So...
it's so hard.
Well, because in our patriarchal society, oftentimes men are not allowed to show those kinds of feelings and be a character that you connect with, because a lot of times men will be he's being a pussy, and it's like, he's watching his friends get murdered brutally. He's allowed to cry. Like, fuck off. But at the end of the day, you're trying to sell tickets. You're trying to make money on these movies, and so showing a male character go through that same kind of fear and terror and watching them have those emotions isn't as easily connected with as a woman going through those things.
I hope they remake some of these with a male as the final girl version. You know, I think I would still
like
not watch it because I'm scared. But it would be neat to see more male or male presenting characters on screen be allowed to accept their emotions and show them.
Yeah, it would be cool.
I'm just saying, if anyone's gonna see a friend get stabbed to death in front of you, even if you don't cry right away, you're gonna run. You're gonna fucking be scared. You might shit your pants depending on who the fuck it is you're seeing. Maybe it's a 70-foot tall spider. And then you're running away, and then you finally get somewhere safe. Maybe you puke, maybe you cry, and that's okay. I would do all those things.
I know.
That would be me. All of those things would happen. I am willingly accepting the fact that I would shit myself if I saw a 70-foot tall spider. And I would run with the shit in my pants. Because I want to survive. I'm just saying.
Same. I would, like, some of the situations in these movies, it's like, I would just throw up and, like, have a panic attack.
I know. Like, I know adrenaline can do a lot to get you through things, but, like, once that adrenaline's gone, you bet your ass I am vomiting or, like, a body fluid is out of me.
Fair game.
And then I cry.
It is really cool, though, because in media, we don't often see male audiences being almost forced in a way to connect so deeply with a female character.
Yeah.
And these movies succeed at making you feel for that female and put yourself in her shoes in a way that I think a lot of other genres kind of fail or are trying to succeed at more, but somehow, I don't know, it's like they're like, well, she's getting tortured too, so I guess I can feel for her. Like,
I guess.
So I guess I should recognize her feelings.
No. Fuck that noise.
Clover also says that a very common experience for her is that during the final confrontation, she becomes masculinized through phallic appropriation by using a weapon such as a knife, gun, or chainsaw against her killer.
Phallic appropriation.
Phallic appropriation. So most of these killers are men.
Yep.
They're often physically overpowering. A lot of the times these women are quite smaller, and so them picking up something like a crowbar or a knife, it's like dick-shaped, I guess?
How the fuck
I don't know.
is a knife dick-shaped?
I haven't read the whole book. I've read snippets, but, like, I get the psychological idea of phallic appropriation. It's like you are stabbing somebody with something, like those kind of, like, imagery. It is a very masculine way to attack things because we do not picture often feminine people murdering with, like, force weapons. A lot of times we picture, like, poison or, like, sneaky things. Not so much, like, just a knife or, like, a baseball bat. Yeah.
Just thinking about it.
Clover does conclude that the final girl is an agreed-upon fiction for male viewers' use of her as a vehicle for his own sadomasochistic fantasies.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Oh my god. Sadomasochistic fantasies?
Yes. So that's kind of a general, like, theory behind a lot of people who do really enjoy horror, is that there is a sort of sadomasochism to it. We are enjoying watching other people be in pain. And the reasons behind that are very different. A lot of women who are more into genre tend to talk about how it almost normalizes violence and makes them more comfortable with it. And because they are looking at a screen and knowing that it is fiction, they are okay with it. And it lets them kind of separate that from like the real life horror that a lot of women have to face every day. Whereas like men, it's kind of more of like a slightly more like sexualized fantasy of like almost like torture porn kind of grossness in that way. Obviously not saying that any of this is true for everybody, but like these are some of the different ways that people have like psychologically looked at those who are obsessed with genre. And how
and like why their obsession might be so, like, why are you so interested in, like, for me, I love a romantic comedy. I'm sure there's a reason someone could psychologically break down why I'm interested in it. So it makes sense how some people would be so curious why thrillers or horror films might be the chosen movie choice of excitement for you.
Yeah, okay. And the trope of the final girl is very much one of the less sexualized female archetypes in horror, because she is supposed to be almost non-gendered in a lot of the situations. Like, she is dressed modestly, she is usually bookish, and not necessarily wearing a lot of makeup. Like, she's not really presented in a hypersexual manner, but we, for some reason, enjoy watching her go through trauma and pain and succeed at the end. And it's this weird sort of like experience that I don't know why I enjoy, like a well done like final girl horror film, but I do. Like, it's weird. I think I am one of those people who does look at horror and genre films as a way to kind of confront real world horror and kind of almost numb yourself to it.
Oh, Alison.
Not in like a sad way. but yeah, I freaking love genre. It's an interesting experience. I do have a little section before I get into like the specific characters, just about the general overarching treatment of women in horror movies. It's safe to say that women in these films are not treated well. The final girl trope is kind of where we see the beginning of a shift in female characters having more agency in horror films. But, of course, this is one of those things that is a baby step to better representation of them. Because they are still quite limited, they are still not particularly deep, oftentimes, and there is definitely still room to grow when it comes to female representation in horror. But it's a start.
Always have to start somewhere.
The palatable nature of the final girl in regards to social expectations is what has made it such a popular and recognizable trope. Her normally passive nature in the beginning of the films means that she is non-threatening to the masculine desires that fuel the killers. By the end of the movie, she has watched her immoral friend group all be pretty much murdered for their sins. So they are made an example of, while she gets to rise above the violence and come out the other side as victorious. So her, like, moral purity, in a way, is what allows her to live. You should see Fonda's face right now. She just, like, looks so, like, dumbstruck.
I don't really like the use of moral purity, or like someone being so pure that everyone around them doesn't fucking matter.
Yes.
It's very, I don't know, just because someone is sexually open to not being down in a relationship and they just like to have sex with other people, or hey, you know what, I really like weed, you know, that doesn't make them inherently, just for those quote-unquote sins, a bad or immoral person.
Yeah.
I don't know, so many people fucking drink alcohol. Like, that doesn't mean just once a night and you drink the whole bottle. That's not me, by the way. No. I do not drink. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I don't like how I feel about how the final girl trope has to rely on her purity.
Yeah.
Because that makes me feel like she's still an object, if that makes sense.
And I think that's kind of how it started. Ugh. It is starting to morph away from that, as I will talk about with a couple of the other characters that I do mention, because these are from, like, the final girl really started in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
So there was very much, like, that moral push when it came to film and stuff like that. There was always that kind of, like, underlying feeling of, like, times are changing and those who are involved in making those movies and writing those stories are of a different time. And so then those ideas are trickling down into their work and into their art. Yes. And so it is changing. It's definitely
Oh yeah, I remember a movie, just a side tangent, that I think diverged from tropes but still brought the tropes back. Alison was nonstop talking about this one movie when her and I worked at the Cineplex movie theater together, Cabin in the Woods.
Yes, I do talk about that.
Yeah, it's a movie she loves. If you're going to dive into it, I won't go too much, but I just remember you were talking about the fact that, like, as a whole, it, like, they had to make these characters fit into certain tropes that no longer existed.
Yes.
So they had to do other means to make, like, the dumb, quote-unquote, jock. Which I remember you were like, Chris Hemsworth plays a dude.
Which is so
who's,
good.
like, really smart and intelligent, and he's into all these other things, but he's well-read. And then they dumb him down to some weird drug. And I remember you telling me about this, and I was like, I would watch it if it wasn't so scary. I tried. I genuinely tried for you, Alison. I couldn't.
It is creepy.
but yeah.
A big thing in slasher films, which is actually also shown in Cabin in the Woods, is the idea of death by sex. So, if you're a character who is seen having sex on screen, you're most likely going to be killed by the killers.
Oh, that's not fair.
It's not, but it is very classic, and it's such, like, a funny thing, because as a fan of these films, it's like you see these two characters usually engaging in consensual sex, and then you're just, like, counting down until they get murdered.
That's so sad. Sad.
Throughout her time in film, the final girl has definitely evolved to become more of a threat. Her success at staying alive kind of started as more chance and luck and possibly being saved by a male character, but now it seems like she is more actively portrayed saving herself, which is the growth of this archetype and the making of it becoming more of, like, an overall deeper character that's not just, like, scared, traumatized young woman, which we have a lot of in film, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about just little, like, shallow dives into a couple of the main female characters, because honestly, I do love them, but there's not really a whole lot
to work with
on a couple of them in terms of, like, a full episode. I might touch on one of them again, but yeah, like, I might do a full Scream episode, because there's a lot to the character of Sidney Prescott, but
I hate the Scream movies.
They're so good, and they're so campy.
Dude is so scary looking. I remember so many people dressing up as him for Halloween when I was younger, and I just hated it.
Ghostface is awesome.
No, he's called Ghostface for a reason. To make his character. I'm not happy. Sorry, go on.
It's okay.
I'll reel in my emotions about horror movies. I wish I was. You know, get me, Alison. Whenever you and I are into horror things, I'm down. I'm down for some Call of Cthulhu board games, but get me into watching visually something terrifying.
It's a lot.
Hell nah.
The first one that I want to talk about is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Cool.
From 1974. The final girl being Sally Hardesty, played by Marilyn Burns. So this is a super classic final girl.
Okay.
She is in her group of friends. She is the modest one. She's not super sexualized. We never really seeing her doing anything like sexy. She has one friend who like is in like little short jean shorts and is dressing all scantily for the 70s, which
Okay.
yeah, which is slightly different now. It's just like, yeah, that's like a normal summer look. She looks great.
She looks good. Question: do all of the horror movies, in your opinion, take place during like fall Halloweenish times?
A lot of them do. Texas Chainsaw Massacre takes place in summer, and it's filmed in a very interesting way. Like, all of the color tones are all really like kind of browny and like
It's like dark,
like,
and gritty looking,
dirty
Okay.
looking, but it just, watching that movie, you feel hot. You feel sweaty and sticky and uncomfortable, like, because you're supposed to. Like,
Why are you watching something that makes you feel this way?
because it's a classic. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I watched it for the first time maybe like 2 years ago with my husband, and it was so good. This is like the classic creepy like murder family in a house in the middle of nowhere. This one has the character of Leatherface that a lot of people know of, and Leatherface, yes.
What the fuck?
He wears human skin on his face.
Oh! Oh, is it like leather because it's cured human?
Yes.
Ew! Ew! Ew!
And
Me!
he's one of the sons of like a family of people who used to be butchers. And the story is just like a bunch of teens who are traveling in a van happen upon this weird family.
Okay.
And Sally has a brother who's a paraplegic who she's like kind of always got to take care of. Of all of the final girls on this list, I feel like Sally suffers the most. Like, it is a lot. The kind of trauma that she goes through is so much, but it's nice in a way that it's never... They never cross that line into, like, sexually terrorizing her. This movie treats these youths as meat. They don't treat them, like, in a sexual way, which is a really interesting way that they made this film, because these people are butchers, and so these youths are being treated as that. And it's a really interesting movie. Sally survives, and she, like, fights her way out of it. The actress also went through hell. There's like one scene where she had to like burst through a door, and they didn't have like knee pads or anything, so she actually was like physically exhausted as she's trying to burst through this door, and it really comes through that she was exhausted. But that's one of those like moral gray areas in filmmaking where they're like, well, if you really terrorize your actors, they're gonna have a more truthful experience. It's like, or you could give them like a safe place to act.
Yes.
But Sally she escapes at the end. She ends up hopping in the back of the truck, and you see Leatherface with this big ass chainsaw, like waving it around in the air, like freaking out. And she just is exhausted. Like, by the end of the movie, you see her like crying and experiencing all these emotions, and you're so happy when she manages to escape. And it's such a classic for what it is, because she never catches a fucking break until the very end of the movie. And so you spend the whole movie just being like, oh my god, this poor woman. Like, she goes through absolute hell in that movie. And
sounds like it.
yeah, like, there's a reason. I think this is the movie when, let me double check. I'm going to go back to its Wikipedia. This movie was actually banned in several countries, and numerous theaters stopped showing the film in response to complaints about its violence. So this is like really one of the first showings of the final girl of this like hard slasher. And now it's almost like we are so numb to slasher movies that they have to keep like stepping it up and up like they did with Saw. But I don't like those super gore ones.
Yeah.
Like, this one, although its content is very violent. It is not particularly gory, which I think really is what I find to make a good slasher film, is that it is violent and it is scary and it does get all those things across, but you don't have to like bring the gore into it in order to make it like shocking.
Yeah.
You just bring in,
make you feel terrified.
yeah.
Like, I haven't watched it, but I know a lot of people liked that one movie. It was all about everyone having to be quiet.
Oh, The Quiet Place.
Yes, thank you. The Quiet Place, like, I'd heard a lot of people talking about the reason what made it so scary was you didn't really see the creatures, but also when sound was used,
Yes.
it put you on edge.
It was really good. I watched that alone on my couch downstairs
Why
with all the lights
did you choose to do that to yourself? What the fuck? Listen,
because it was good.
I would never do that to myself. I watch scary things in the morning.
It was the worst too. Like, my dog is such an asshole when I'm watching horror movies, because like it'll be this super intense scene and I'm terrified, and he'll like just like yip at the back door to be let out, and I'm just like, no, I'm not going outside. It's dark and it's scary. And he's like, but I gotta go pee. And it's like, fuck. So then I have to like pause the movie at like the most intense part. My friend and I were watching Hereditary, and at one of the like at one of like the most creepy parts of it, he just comes and sits in front of the fucking television with his big head in the middle.
Dutch, I would be very supportive of Dutch if I was
He's
watching.
like, hello. Hello. I am here. Would you take me outside, please, and pay attention to me?
Oh my god. Oh my
He's an asshole that way. The next one is Laurie Strode from Halloween.
Okay.
Movie came out in 1978, and it's played by the fabulous Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh.
Jamie Lee Curtis is awesome in this film. She was relatively unknown at the time when it came out, but her mother had actually been in the old film Psycho, and she had been in that one, and so that's how the director was like, oh, okay, let's take a chance on this young woman. And she is bookish, she is not particularly popular, while her friends are having boys over and hooking up, she's babysitting. And she spends the whole movie basically trying to protect these kids that she's babysitting and trying to make sure that her friends are okay. They're not. Spoiler.
Are the kids okay? Please.
The kids
Thank
survive.
God.
She does save the children.
Thank God.
This movie is a bit of a slow burner compared to some of the other ones. Like, it does
Okay.
take a while to get into kind of the action and the slasher part of the movie.
Gotcha.
But it is possibly one of the first, if not the most popular, that kind of brought in that you knock out the killer and then you go and leave and then he's alive again, but you don't double check that he's dead. So this happens like 2 or 3 times in this fucking movie, and I'm just like, fuck. It happens so many times, and I get so pissed. Because it's like you stabbed him, but then you like ran away. It's like, stab him again, and then stab him again, and then make sure he can't fucking get up. But she walks away, and that is like one of the classic moments in horror movies, is like you had mentioned, it's such a thing in movies, and it drives the audience nuts, but like, I get it in
Like
reality.
splitting up. Don't fucking split up.
Don't do it.
It's, if anything, D&D. Fucking
Don't split the party.
Don't split the party.
She goes on. There's a bunch of other Halloween movies. As I mentioned, there's a new one where she's kind of dealing with that like historical trauma of Michael Myers and his big thing, because that's a lot of these movies are known by their killers.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this one is Michael Myers, and God, it's fun. She just, at the end of the movie, she's got this big ass knife and she's just fighting so hard, and it's great. Next, we're gonna talk about Scream.
Oh no!
Scream is like, I'm so surprised you can't watch Scream, because it is such a tongue-in-cheek, Like, Scream came out in 1996.
The Mask is really scary.
The Mask is creepy. It came out in 1996. Our final girl is Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell. This is such a meta movie. Like, it knows exactly what it is. It's like, the Wes Craven obviously is a fan of old horror and loves like the final girl trope. And he like wants to just capture that. There is literally a character in the movie that lays out the rules of a horror movie of what not to do. And
is just, one of them don't split up?
I believe that's one of them. Another one is like don't drink or do drugs. Then obviously there's don't have sex. And literally there's like a party where they're all drinking and doing drugs. That's when he's telling them the rules, is while they're partying. And it's like, god damn it. It's so fun. And Sidney Prescott is really like a main character. She is well-rounded. And she is, I believe, the very first final girl to have sex on screen and not be killed for it. She loses her virginity to her boyfriend in the movies. She survives. And
is the boyfriend dead, though?
This movie is 25 years old, so I am going to spoil the ending a little bit. Her boyfriend does die. And he's not a good person. But he is played by Skeet Ulrich.
Oh!
So, Riverdale Jughead's dad. Which is super fun.
Oh!
Like, it's so sad that he looks like such a scumbag, but he's pretty. I like him.
Okay, so
we also have Matthew Lillard, who plays Shaggy.
What?
This is one of like his early movies, which is fucking amazing.
It's the precedence to Scooby-Doo.
No, he also dies.
Oh no! Not Shaggy! He needed Scooby-Doo! He needed the gang! He needed someone to go rut-row!
Then we also have Courtney Cox and David Arquette and Drew Barrymore. Like this.
Drew Barrymore?
This movie was so fucking clever.
Don't tell me she died.
She dies in like the first 5 minutes of the movie.
Barrymore! No!
And that was like the big joke of this movie, is that she was on like all of the posters. It's like, this is a Drew Barrymore joint. Like, come see Scream. And it's just immediately she just gets fucking murdered.
Oh no.
And everybody's just like, the fuck?
I thought she was the main.
No.
Oh my god.
And we get to follow Sidney through these 3 movies, fighting Ghostface in his many iterations, because things do change and who's behind the mask is changing and stuff like that.
I guess that makes sense, but that's also so irritating.
Yeah, it's like, I believe it's in the second one, there's literally a film franchise that is starting that is about the killing from the first movie. Like, this franchise gets just so fucking meta and just like weirdly ingrained in its own lore and stuff, and it's very fun. It's a super fun bunch of movies. The first one is very clearly the best. Second one's pretty good, and then it just kind of peters further down.
Oh dear.
But they're all fun. It's fun. It's a good time.
It's fun.
Last one that I want to talk about is Cabin in the Woods from 2011. We've kind of gone through some of the decades, the different versions of the final girl.
Yeah.
This final girl, her name is Dana, and it's played by Kristen Connolly. As we mentioned, this film plays a lot with the idea of horror tropes, which is the nerd, so Dana, the final girl, her sexy blonde best friend, her best friend's sexy jock boyfriend, their stoner friend, and the handsome love interest. And it's a bunch of kids going to a cabin. I genuinely did not want to go see this movie when it was in theaters, and I kick myself every time I watch it again because I wish I had. Because looking at it, I was like, this is just going to be another one of those, like, stupid slasher films. Like, it's not really going to do anything. And then after I watched it, I was like, holy shit. Like, that was such a fun movie. It was such a clever twist, which I'm not going to super get into. You should just go watch it. It's not what you expect. All of these people are shown at the beginning of the movie to be so much more than their tropes imply. And then they just further and further sink into that trope for reasons I'm not going to get into.
Yeah.
But it is great. It is so good. We see Dana fighting and trying to avoid all of the things that you think that a final girl would run, like, kind of towards. Like, so she avoids, or she's trying to avoid a lot of those story traps. It doesn't work. And she is genuinely being manipulated and terrorized the movie, but she is so determined to get out of this situation. She's super badass, and she makes some crazy final choices, which you'll have to watch and see.
Have to watch.
It's so good. And she fights the zombie torture incest family? Something like that.
What?
What?
Why? No, thank you.
Let me just double check what they're called. Oh, it was the zombie redneck torture family.
The shit. Fuck.
Different. But yeah, so that's what she's fighting. They're so ridiculously scary. Like, they did such a good job with this movie, and it's just such a fun ride.
Who's the cat? I know, obviously, Chris Hemsworth. But is there any other actors that people might know of in this one?
Her friend is played by Anna Hutchison. The love interest is Jesse Williams, and the stoner friend is Fran Kranz. So not a lot of, like, super well-known people.
Okay.
It's fun. The funny joke, too, is that a lot of people are like, when's the second one coming out? And the director's just like, did you watch my movie? The answer is no.
I know that. You told me how it ended.
Which I just think is great.
Is there a second movie? The answer is no.
No, there's definitely not a sequel. I'd be down for, like, a prequel, kind of in the same world.
Like
but
how it got started?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, but hard no on the sequel.
Hard no.
To wrap up, I just kind of want to explain a little bit more about, like, why I personally enjoy this trope.
Okay.
I used to be super afraid of horror movies, but but I really started getting into the ones from the 70s and 80s because they do have such interesting stories, and kind of the making of them was so interesting to me as far as, like, a film craft perspective, that in learning about how they were made, I could watch them and enjoy them more and not quite get so caught up in, like, the horror and the scariness of it in order to, like, get my own way of watching them and being entertained. But I did find that a lot of the big ones had female characters in them that are left without any agency really at all. A lot of times they are just there to be killed or emotionally tortured or physically or whatever. But then we start getting the final girl who starts to actually fight back, who starts to physically take back her agency. Even if she doesn't have it earlier on in the film, she does start to actually make active decisions and to make active choices, which was really nice to see. And also, I connect a lot with the beginning of the final girl. So I wasn't the most popular girl in high school. I don't even now consider myself to be.
I think you're a catch.
Oh, thank you. I really connected with that kind of bookish, like, you're not really, like, the cool one in the friend group. They're still your friends and you still love them and they still love you, but you're not cool.
Yeah.
You're just kind of there. And that is a lot of times the final girl. Like, she is the normal friend in the group. And so seeing her fight against her fears and fight back against a monster makes me think that maybe I have, like, that in me too, right? It's like, like, hey, like, maybe, like, I can be stronger, I can be more confident, I can do all of these things. Not that I ever want to experience any of the things that these women go through, but I like to kind of have that little bit of a connection to see myself in a character in a way that's not necessarily glamorized as much in other movies, because a lot of times we are following female characters that are very, like, confident and beautiful and, like, know who they are and all of these things that I definitely didn't feel. And so being able to, it's a nice way to, like, connect with a character. It's also such a fun trope to twist and to change in horror. I've really enjoyed watching the growth of it through the decades and seeing how it's been handled by multiple different directors and different writers, and I'm excited to see where new directors take it and kind of what they can do with this and how they can make it even better than what it started out as. For example, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is kind of a twisted version of the final girl trope. Only she is the continuation of it. She is the Slayer, the one girl that can save us all and must do it alone. That goes to show you just how many creative ways that you can take it, is that she does start out that way as being very, like, need to stand on her own and needing to fight back against all these monsters all by herself, but then she grows from that and becomes more, which we will one day get super into.
Oh, I know.
So overall, it's just really fun, and it can be dissected and discussed from so many points of view, a few of which we got into in this episode. But at the end of the day, I don't really expect that much from slasher films, but if it gives me a badass fictional female, I'm, like, totally in. I love it. It's fun. She doesn't have to be perfect. She doesn't have to be, like, everything. It's fun. It's just have fun with it. If you enjoy those kinds of movies, it's great. I love a good horror movie. So, Fonda, what are you excited about today?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. So, do you know about Baldur's Gate, the video games?
Yes.
Okay, so Baldur's Gate 3 came out for early access, and I recently purchased it, as did my lovely significant other, and we started playing it, and I love it so much. If anyone doesn't know, Baldur's Gate 3 is the third installment of a role-playing video game series that looks to offer both single-player and cooperative multiplayer experiences. It's very, very influenced and based off of Dungeons and Dragons tabletop role-playing system, which is kind of cool. And I'm just kind of excited about it because I'm like, oh, sometimes I really feel like doing D&D, but I don't want to, like, have to rely on trying to plan and schedule all that shit because it takes time. So the fact that there's a video game that can do it for me, love it.
That is awesome.
Yeah, so that's what I'm into at the moment.
Yay.
Alison, I think you would like the game.
I think I would too.
I genuinely do. Anyways, dear listeners, you can find us wherever podcasts can be found. Please make sure to rate and subscribe if you haven't already. And you can follow us on Tumblr, Twitter, and Instagram at Wench Bench Pod. And if you want to reach out, you can send us an email at wenchbenchpod@gmail.com. All of the art that is made for the Wench Bench was designed by the wonderful Tessa Joyce Riecken, and you can find her on Twitter at Werevile. She's also on Instagram with the same handle. You can find her there too. Anyways, thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.